And the top stories. Awards presented to the 25 most remarkable teens. Rapid antigen tests now available at Jamaica hospitals. And UK borrowing to hit peacetime high amid COVID-19 emergency. Hello and welcome to the ZIZ Midday Newscast. Today is Friday, November 27, 2020. I am your presenter, Shaira Flanders. Several teenagers were recognized for their achievements in life on Thursday evening during the 2020 edition of the 25 Most Remarkable Teens ceremony. The event was held at the Rivers of Living Water Christian Center and was carried live on ZIZ TV. Members of Parliament were on hand to present the awards for categories such as School Pride, Courage to Overcome, Music, and Most Promising. The awardees are Khadijah Edgin, Kayla Hanley, Cheyenne Tyson, Tyron Webb, Malaya Erskine, Rodina DaCosta, Ciantanesia Thomas, Vanessa Simon, Gregory McGrath, Moriel Knight, Danerick Robinson, Ajane Bristol, Tana French, Elise Thomas, Nikesha Henry, Ajani Batiste, Carol Woods, Kijari Huggins, Tira Penny, Aidan Tuckett, Julian Francis, Marika Cumberbatch, Janaya Brown, Tijonique Morton, and Devoncia Clark. The 25 Most Remarkable Teens ceremony is held as part of Youth Month to empower and celebrate the achievements of the young people of the Federation. In other news, on Wednesday, Minister of Tourism, the Honorable Lindsay Grant, unveiled the sign for the Rails to Trails project, which forms part of community tourism efforts expected to ensure sustainability of the tourism product and provide jobs for the community. The function was held at Palmetto Point on the train tracks near the Trinity Anglican Church, and Minister Grant spoke to the significance of launching at that location.
Challengers was the first free village in St. Kitts and Nevis. And so it's significant that we are starting here because this has a tremendous amount of history in this area. And as we go along in our Rails to Trails, I am advised that we are going to follow on and go somewhere to Newton Ground, which also has a significant area which we can develop.
According to Minister Grant, the Rails to Trails go back to the history of sugar cultivation in the Caribbean. He noted that with that history, people have their stories to tell, and the project will be one way a person can tell their story to those who come to visit, and that would also bolster their own personal development and knowledge of what their ancestors would have gone through.
But we would hope that the Rails to Trails is not only that, but turns out to be an economic driver for the persons in the community, because that's what community tourism is all about. We don't expect that the economics of tourism just rests in the town of Bastille, but we would hope that the economics of tourism filters through places like Palmetto Point and Challengers, and that's what we are hoping from this project.
The ceremony was chaired by Tourism Officer Shailene Welcome and was attended by local resident Mrs. Yvonne Seaton, who assisted Minister Grant in unveiling the sign. And as we wrap up this local segment, Audi Brisbane and Sons Trading Limited has donated 20,000 face masks to the Ministry of Health for use by frontline workers to aid in the COVID-19 relief efforts. The donation was made by Kumar Kirpalini, General Manager of Food Center and Audi Brisbane, and accepted by Dr. Cameron Wilkinson, Medical Chief of Staff at the Joseph and France General Hospital, during Wednesday's National Emergency Operations Center daily briefing.
I know it's not an easy task that the frontline workers are doing, and we definitely wish them all the best, and we have them in our prayers. What we are doing today is we are donating some face masks, and we hope that it will go a long way in the fight against this pandemic.
Dr. Wilkinson expressed thanks and appreciation to Mr. Karpalani and OD Brisbane for the donation and noted that the mask will be put to great use. He also noted that the wearing of masks is a key measure and the Ministry of Health is extremely grateful for the donation.
And we know that the mask is a very important tool in the armamentarium in the fight against COVID-19. And we're happy that you had the frontline workers on your mind. You mentioned that you were praying. There are a lot of people who are praying for us, but we're happy that you went beyond the prayers and that with the all of society approach, you decided to make this donation.
Medical Chief of Staff at the Joseph and France General Hospital, Dr. Cameron Wilkinson. We now move on to news on the regional scene in Jamaica. Rapid antigen tests now available for COVID-19 and can now be done in minutes, and its results known in an hour after 9 public health facilities across the island have been equipped to do rapid antigen testing as part of a 1-month pilot project. Here's more in this report.
The Spanish Town Hospital in St. Catherine is among the list of 9 public health facilities now equipped to do rapid antigen testing. During a demonstration of the 2 rapid antigen tests now available, a swab is taken from a suspected COVID-19 case and its droplet squeezed onto a device similar to a pregnancy test.
So 15 to 30 minutes you can observe it for your results. Give an example. A positive results will come with 2 lines.
When asked whether citizens can come to the hospital for testing, the health officials recommend against it. Instead, an appointment should be made to prevent exposure.
The tests are administered to symptomatic patients, so patients that have symptoms, because that's when you get the most accuracy and effectiveness. And if you get a negative in that case, persons are recommended to do a PCR test.
Rapid antigen tests are recommended for the tourism industry for travelers, as well as the sports industry and the business community. The Ministry of Health says they've completed training of public health officials and will soon train private health workers so they can start offering testing. Rapid antigen testing is free at public health facilities, but for a fee with the private sector. Director of the National Laboratory Services, Dr. Michelle Hamilton, says during the pilot phase, the ministry is seeking to have the information centralized to manage the COVID-19 numbers, as several private labs will opt to do testing.
We have to find a means of getting the results from all the persons who are doing the tests outside of our main laboratories at the Public Health Lab and the NIC. So this F200 instrument allows us to do some sort of connectivity, and we are going to be exploring that level of connectivity during the pilot phase to see if we can have some sort of automatic transmission of the results.
Jamila Maitland for CVM Live.
The COVID-19 pandemic has served a crippling blow to the cruise ship industry, causing islands like the Bahamas to lose tens of millions of dollars. Local tourism officials are anxious for a reboot, but they have cautioned that when port services do resume, cruise lines will be enforcing their stiff safety mechanisms. Here's more.
Last year, a reported 5.4 million visitors came to the Bahamas by cruise ship. With the pandemic still looming large, those water hotels will continue to be a distant memory. In fact, Tourism Minister, the Honorable Dionisio de Aguilar, says service by cruise lines to this destination has been postponed to next year.
They were looking at resuming service probably in the first couple of weeks in December, but I think that's now been pushed back until sometime in the first quarter of 2021. And so, the fact that they're not coming translates into an abandoned Bay Street where most stores are shuttered and there's just no economic activity out there. So it is devastating, the complete evaporation of the cruise market, and especially on our city center and our taxi cab drivers and straw vendors and the like. So we're anxious for them to resume.
Since March, the Bahamas has lost well over $200 million in cruise ship revenue to the pandemic.
When they resume, they're going to be so super cautious because any outbreak on any ship is going to reflect poorly on the industry, and it's going to cause the CDC to keep looking at their industry to see whether they should shut it back down again. So I have to advise the Bahamian people that when they resume, that they are going to start, of course, by going to their private islands, because they can control that whole experience far better there. They can test everybody on the island, they can check everybody who's working on the island. And then they're going to come to Nassau and go on pre-arranged excursions where
The tourism minister is asking stakeholders patience and understanding. Carla Palmer, ZNS Network News.
On the international scene, the UK is cutting billions of dollars from its overseas aid budget, saying it can no longer afford to meet its legal obligations because of the pandemic. Al Jazeera's Paul Brennan reports.
The UK's commitment to spend 0.7% of its gross domestic product on overseas aid is a promise enshrined in British law. And it has helped fund vaccination programmes, education initiatives, poverty relief and refugee support all around the world. The amount spent on aid is barely 1/10 of what is spent each year on the UK Health Service. Announcing a reduction to 0.5% of GDP, the Chancellor acknowledged it was a difficult decision.
I have listened with great respect to those who have argued passionately to retain this target. But at a time of unprecedented crisis, government must make tough choices.
The scope and the political independence of the UK's overseas development work has been fundamentally changed since Boris Johnson decided to merge the Foreign Office and International Development back in September, a move that some critics described as a hostile takeover of the overseas aid budget. Now cutting some $4 billion from that aid budget has been criticised as a moral failure.
We got rich of a long and complex history of relations with the global south, a long history of colonization, of extraction of fossil fuels, of exploitation. We have a moral duty to the world to redistribute a small proportion of our wealth.
But earlier this year, Boris Johnson complained that British aid was being seen as a giant cash machine in the sky, and he demanded value for money. And despite the aid cuts, the Prime Minister insists Britain is still a strong donor nation.
On any view, where this country is one of the biggest investors or donors overseas in all its forms. I think we're the second biggest in the G7 on any view, in whether in percentage terms or in cash terms, and that will continue.
In a year in which the World Bank estimates that COVID-19 will push around 100 million people into extreme poverty, the UK's position is under question.
We've prided ourselves over the last decade or two on being a development superpower, if you like, and this seems to cut across that without there being much of a clear strategic or humanitarian basis for that.
It's bad news for the UK's global standing. Next year, the UK is hosting the G7, it's hosting the UN's Climate Change Summit. It's going to be very difficult for the UK to ask other countries to do more when the UK is cutting back its own aid budget.
There is wide recognition that UK overseas aid could be made more streamlined, better targeted and more effective. And $13 billion is still a significant budget to work with. But scaling back Britain's support for the world's poor and needy is a controversial decision at a sensitive time. Paul Brennan, Al Jazeera, Whitehall.
The controversial Dutch Christmas tradition of Black Pete has increasingly led to violent confrontations across the Netherlands. It involves a white person dressing up as a black helper for Santa Claus and is widely considered to be racist. Protests against the tradition have been cancelled out of fear for people's safety. Here's more in this report.
Most people in the Netherlands have grown up with these images. A black-faced white person who scares and entertains small children this time of the year. But Black Pete is slowly making an exit after Dutch libraries have decided to remove books with this image.
These books have to be removed because of the current discussion in our society and the new insights we have. They will now be part of our archive and be replaced with books portraying Pete in a more neutral way.
The removal of these books has led to such controversy and threats that library employees don't want to be interviewed on camera. This shows how deeply divided the Netherlands is about this disputed tradition. Increasingly, protests against Black Pete have turned violent, with supporters attacking opponents and police. Roberto Nefuani was threatened after supporters of Black Pete burst into his shop and shouted racist remarks. That night, his windows were smashed.
Het is duidelijk dat ik slachtoffer ben, want ja, je ziet het.
It's clear that I've become a victim, like you can see, and I have been a victim all my life with the tradition of Black Pete. I have no words. I think enough has been said. It's now time to change, and people should wake up.
A recent survey shows that a majority in the Netherlands want to stick with the traditional character of Black Pete. Many also reject the compromise already used in several cities called Chimney Pete, whose face is covered with some black stains. For Walter Homburg, Pete has to be black.
En discriminatie, dat is het laatste wat ik wil geven of...
I don't want to discriminate against anyone. To me, Black Pete is a mysterious figure, not a person. It's a masquerade and not a skin color. So you can be unrecognizable on the street and children see you as a fairy tale figure.
For nearly 30 years he has transformed into Black Pete in the weeks before the Dutch Santa Claus celebration, reaching its peak on December 5th. Like most supporters, he says Black Pete is not a racist tradition.
It's lack of awareness. It's lack of awareness because, yeah, white people don't get to decide what is racism. Racism is racism, and it doesn't matter what your intention are. We are not looking at intention. We are looking at the impact. You know, even though you don't mean it that way, it's about the impact. And with the best intention in the world, you can still hurt people.
No more blackface! No more blackface! No. Due to protests he organized over recent years, songs like these about Black Pete have been changed, and a figure that was long accepted in Dutch society has now become controversial. But as long as libraries can't openly speak about removing books with Black Pete's images, opponents of Black Pete still have a long way to go. Step Vassen, Al Jazeera, Amsterdam.
And now for the weather. Present weather is fair. A gentle breeze of 7 miles per hour is moving from a north-northeasterly direction. Current temperature is 26 degrees Celsius or 78 degrees Fahrenheit. Today we can expect mostly sunny skies with only a 10% or slight chance of a brief shower, while tonight is expected to be mostly fair with cool conditions. Sunset today will be at 5:34 p.m. and the sun is expected to rise tomorrow at 6:22 a.m. And that brings us to the end of the ZIZ Midday Newscast. Join us this evening for these stories and more in detail. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your presenter, Shaira Flanders. Have a good one.